and welcome to the SBK Betting Podcast. And, well, specifically, a big welcome to anyone new. Any new listeners to the podcast who might have been alerted to the hype within the racing world over the last week for what we have been naming the race of the season, which takes place this weekend at Ascot. But you might be here to find out what all the fuss is about, or you might be a regular listener who is extremely keen to hear the thoughts of our experts. And although one of them, as we know, is a passionate jumps man, I think even the most diehard of jumps fans will be tuning in to see this Saturday's King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Stakes. It is mouth-watering, and we will get into that in a moment. Before we quickly recap on a good bit of tipping from last week, although it wasn't always plain sailing, slightly heart and mouth stuff from Save the Last Dance in the Irish Oaks. She traded at 999 to 1, but all three of us did put her up. I not sure about you guys, but I definitely didn't back her in running. But if I did, then if anyone did, they were very punchy, because she didn't look like it was going to happen. But she went on, got going late to prove her stamina, and she won it for Aidan and Ryan Moore at 10 to 11. But it was the super sprint where I think was the performance of the weekend. Ross, you were very strong on Relief Rally. She just absolutely blitzed the field. She was far too good for all of them, despite having quite a lot of weight, but the 9 stone didn't seem to worry her at all. Ross, quickly on her performance and potential throughout the course of the rest of the year. She looks like a top class filly in the making, doesn't she?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned last week I thought she was unfortunate not to be unbeaten coming into it, and she was the clear standout on figures, and sort of burrow away trying to find something that's perhaps well handicapped against her on the weights, and there just simply wasn't anything. And as long as she got a clear passage, she won, and that was the only concern. Just, I think Tom Marcon probably had to move earlier than he would have chosen to. Just there was a gap potentially closing on him, but she just found. You know, she was very, very impressive, and you know, although it was a very winnable race, it's arguably a career best. They can do whatever they like with it now. I mean, going into it, I was convinced that she'd be better over 6. Be interesting to see if they go that way. There's some quite nice targets for over 6 firms for fillies, or whether they roll the dice and go in the none thought, where obviously she would get absolutely buckets of weight from everything, being a 2-year-old filly. So she's a really exciting horse, and yeah, probably I agree with you. Performance of the weekend for me.
Yeah, William Haggas just mentioned the Lowther. He also talked about the Prix de l'Abbé long term, plenty of potential. And as you touched on weight, which is topical, because, you know, sometimes having too much more weight in a race compared to the others, it just doesn't matter if you're the best horse in the race. And I think that will be very important angle to look at, especially when we discuss the King George. Pleased to have also seen my nap Art Power absolutely destroy his field at the Curragh. He remains unbeaten at that track, and it was a good thing, really. He was well back to the end at 6 to 5. But it is the King George that we're going to focus on, and we'll dissect it and try and get as much as we can in not a too long a podcast, because we could go on for hours, but we want to keep it concise, but we also want to get the most out of the team here today and make sure that we can't kind of cover all angles, because there's plenty that we could cover. Obviously, news came in this morning that there'll be no Derby winner of 2022 Desert Crown. He's had another setback. So that's one Derby winner out, but we have this year's Derby winner in Auguste Rodin. We have last year's Irish Derby winner in Westover. We have the 1-2 from both the Irish and Epsom Derbies. We've got 3 Coronation Cup winners. We've got last year's winner Pyledriver, 6 Group 1 winners. Essentially, that's what's all the fuss is all about. You know, we got 2 of the best 3-year-olds in the country in this country and in Ireland, in Auguste Rodin and King of Steel. They're going up against their elders, and I think for a long time that's what's the race. Well, that's what it's been all about. Are the 3-year-olds better than their elders? But I think it's got more than that. There's a lot to take out of this field. There's a lot to sort of get through. And from a betting perspective, just with the refresh now, Desert Crown's out, and now that we've got the draw, a quick betting check, because King of Steel and Auguste Rodin now 3 to 1 joint favourites. King of Steel had edge favouritism throughout the course of the anti-post markets, but they're now currently joint favourites. Hukum is 7 to 2. Then we've got 9 to 2 for Emily Upjohn. Pyledriver, last year's winner, 7 to 1. Luxembourg, 14 to 1, 16 to 1 Westover, and bigger prices for the rest of them. Right, Tom, where should we begin? Trends, you like a trend? I suppose the 3-year-olds, they've had a poor record in this race. I suppose, how good are these 3-year-olds compared to the ones we've seen in the past? We've seen a Derby winner win this recently in the shape of Adaya. I've got a feeling that these 3-year-olds might be better than them, but I think our older horses in this year are slightly better than they have been in times gone by. They all have the ability, that's why they're all in here, but we're essentially going on potential with the 3-year-olds. Do you think that might be what edges it in terms of how you're looking at it?
It's a really interesting race, isn't it? It's the first proper big test between the 3-year-olds and the older horses. Obviously, the Derby first and second are running in here and deserve to be towards the top of the market. But at the same time, we are guessing that they are better than the older horses. If you look back at trends, 3 of the last 10 winners have been 3-year-olds. However, 17 of the last 21 winners of the King George have been 3 or 4. So that tends to give a hand to the younger horses. Saying that, 4 of the last 5 have actually not been 3 or 4. So even recently, that trend has kind of fallen off a cliff a little bit, largely due to Enable winning this twice in a row, Pyledriver winning it last year. More trends to give you. Ryan Moore's only won this race twice from 15 attempts. Aidan O'Brien's won it 3 from 30 attempts. And the Irish, I think, are 5 from 36. So it's not been a race that Aidan or the Irish in general have really thrived in, which is interesting given Auguste Rodin is right at the top of the market now. People are debating whether Auguste Rodin is better than King of Steel. Obviously, on the evidence we have, he was at Epsom, but King of Steel didn't get the ideal trip, whereas Auguste Rodin did. He's a big horse. He was coming off a layoff. There might have been reasons why King of Steel wasn't 100% that day, whereas Auguste Rodin was. So a form reversal wouldn't surprise me. I don't think much splits the two, but I'm going to be siding with an older horse this time, Jess.
Oh, interesting. So we've got a lot to take from that. Obviously, there are the trends, but there's the other element here as well, in that, we've got 2 very high class 3-year-olds. Last year we didn't see Desert Crown. He was injured before coming into this race, so we were lost without them. The 3-year-olds that turned up were very keen. The race was a small field. There should be a lot of pace in this race. It should set up well for any of them. Is the ground something that comes into your reckoning when you've looked at this, considering how much rain we've had, and we know that Auguste Rodin has essentially completely bombed out when it was very, very testing ground in the Guineas?
Yeah, potentially, although he did win on heavy ground and soft ground last year. So I don't necessarily think it was just due to the ground that day. I think there were other mitigating circumstances as to why he underperformed in the Guineas. Looking through the list of horses at the top of the market, and one other trend, by the way, it's worth touching on, 20 of the last 20 winners 20 winners from the last 20 renewals of the King George have been in the top 5 in the market. So this is very much a race where you should be focusing on the protagonists, largely due to the quality of the horse. When you've got horses rated 120, they don't tend to underperform that often or that much, and they go on to win this race. So the top of the market is where you should be looking. And the top 5 in the market, I think, are all proven on testing ground. So albeit the ground is soft and the round course is particularly soft at Ascot, it wouldn't necessarily, in my opinion, be a huge negative for any of these. I think both the 3-year-olds have a great chance of winning. I'm going to be looking elsewhere, but that's not because I want to completely oppose them. I just think there's better bets in the race. Pyledriver, if you love your each ways at around 7-8 to 1, I think he's a great bet because he's unbeaten over course and distance. He won this race last year. He posted a really good victory last time, so you can't write him off either. However, I'm going to side with Hukum. He's a 6-year-old. He's been underrated throughout his whole career, despite owning a record of 10 wins from 16 starts. Now, that's largely due to the fact he's a slow developer. And actually, he's only just producing his career best now at the age of 6. His last 2 runs were both career best performances. Last time out, I was exceptionally impressed with him. I was at Sandown for the Brigadier Gerard. I thought Desert Crown was given a screamer of a ride by Richard Kingscote. Hit the front at the right time, yet Hukum still ran him down. It was a monster performance. An RPR of 125 was just. He's a 2-time course and distance winner. One of those came on soft ground. He's a stalker, should get the pace in front to chase. I really like Hukum in here, Jess.
Yeah, you can see the case, considering that also, we know that the bit of juice in the ground will just bring out the best in him. But as you said, they've all got these soft ground, the ability to go well on the soft ground. Is it a race that you can see, he's coming out of stall 4. It's a sort of a perfect pitch, if anything, for Jim Crowley just to tuck in. Do you see Jim trying to recreate what happened in the Brigadier Gerald? Because really, if anything, it wasn't an ideal trip, but it actually did quite well because he got so much cover for such a long period of time, which you possibly will have again in this kind of race setup.
Yeah, it worked out perfectly, didn't it, at Sandown? He was in a pocket for a brief period of time until Desert Crown made that move on the outside. He carried the runner who was on his inside forward. That opened up a lovely split for Jim to go through, pull Hukum out wide and win the race. I think he's going to get a very similar trip in here. I think he'll sit 4th or 5th early on. Jim will then wait for the move outside. Then he'll come behind, use Huckum's turn of foot. And he hasn't just got a turn of foot either. This is a horse with an abundance of stamina. He's won over further. I think he's got everything in this race, and people are just going to overlook him by saying, God, I'll be disappointed if Hukum wins this because he's a 6-year-old. But actually, he is producing his career best performances, as I've already touched on, right now in his career. He's technically still an improving and up-and-coming type, despite being 6. So, look, I think he's the horse to beat. And although I wouldn't be surprised if either of the 3-year-olds won, if Emily Upjohn won, if Pyledriver won, I think Hukum is the most solid option in the race.
I suppose it's who knows what he would have achieved last season if he didn't have the injury. And you could say that for Pyledriver as well. Whereas we've seen, slight quirks in Emily Upjohn. We've seen that she's not completely bulletproof. And we don't know how good Auguste Rodin and King of Steel are yet. And this is their first time tested against the older horses. Ross, having listened to all of that, having heard the trends as well, I suppose we've got to touch on these 3-year-olds. Auguste Rodin, his performance in the Irish Derby, is that a worry to you? Do you feel there's a lack of confidence around him now? And with King of Steel, did he impress enough last time for you to think that he can reverse the form then? And some, because he needs to not just reverse the form, but also prove himself against his elders.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a real muddle of a race, isn't it? I mean, fascinating from start to finish. Yeah, Auguste Rodin did concern me last time. I think it was run at a muddling enough pace. I think there's excuses there, but you'd have expected him all the same to have gone and done that a little bit better than he did. Conversely, King of Steel really impressed me at Ascot with what he did at the end, but he was plenty keen enough again through the early part of the race, and you wouldn't want that to happen. But I think the 3-year-old's getting the weight at my angle in, provided it doesn't get too soft. Because I think if it does get soft, these maturing 3-year-olds are just not going to be as physically strong as their elders to cope with the demands of soft ground, whether they appreciate soft ground or not. But I'm working on the basis that the weather forecast is going to be correct, which might be putting a bit of blind faith in the forecasters who don't always get it right. And I just think King of Steel has got every chance of turning it around with Auguste Rodin. As TC hit on, he didn't have the perfect run through the Derby. Probably got to the front too soon. I know Kevin Stott was wishing he'd been able to wait. And I just think he's got less race exposure. He missed his intended debut start of this season because of an incident in the stalls. Only had 2 starts as a 2-year-old. He won on soft ground at Nottingham and then bombed out at Doncaster in the Version Futurity, which Auguste Rodin won. And if you remember then, the talk was very much they weren't going to run him on heavy ground, but he seemed to cope with it, whereas it appeared King of Steel didn't. I just think that such a big 2-year-old was never going to show up again after an impressive debut. I can happily put a line through the run there. So for me, it's King of Steel. I think the interesting thing, and you hit on it slightly with Hukum, is the draw. So you've got Auguste Rodin out wide, so he's going to have to tack across and drop in, which I think would probably suit. I don't think that's going to be an issue. The issue might just be for Kevin Stott, who's drawn in 3, and around him he's got Luxembourg in 1, Bolshoi Ballet in 2, and Point Lonsdale in 5. There's just the sort of cynical racing part of my brain that says surely they're going to try and just get Kevin Stott tucked away on a bit of a pocket on the rail, Bolshoi Ballet or Luxembourg to go forward and then the other one to come alongside and Point Lonsdale to rush up on his outside from 5. Kevin Stott's going to have to be very sharp in the early stages on a horse that's probably going to be keen. So he ideally would like to drop in and get cover, but if he does drop in and get cover, is he getting cover behind basically 3 horses from his opponent's yard. I think that's going to be a really interesting facet. But I just think you can overthink things. I think he's the best 3-year-old in the field, and I think the 3-year-olds probably have the edge with the weight. So not a chips all in selection, but I just think King of Steel's got huge upside with him.
Okay, so the keenness element is the one that I'm curious on. It's a big day for these 3-year-olds, especially King of Steel being so lightly raced, and what we saw last year with Westover and Emily Upjohn, who just completely ruined their chances by being too keen. Do you think the race setup being a smaller field just didn't play to their advantages, and this will help them, that there is clear pace on, or do you think that is still a slight worry in your mind?
I think you're right, and I think last year Westover and Emily Upjohn very much had eyes on each other. It was very much a cat and mouse affair. Whereas if you're Ryan Moore and Kevin Stott, you can't only worry about one other opponent in this race, because there's so many that, as we've just pointed out, that you have to keep an eye on. So you just have to ride your own race. And I think when that happens, you tend to get a more honest pace, and hopefully horses that can be keen won't be, and we'll get a real contest. And then we'll, because the King George last year, Pyledriver, you felt really sorry for him because he got absolutely no credit because everyone spoke about the horse that didn't win. So what we want is a nice, even, fair race so we can revel in the victor without anyone throwing stones at them.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any excuses. The ground is now soft, good soft in places. There was 17 mil of rain overnight, which is extraordinary amount. There's showers possibly likely today. It feels like a real end of autumn day, not the middle of summer. But it could be, the breeze could dry out. I was actually quite surprised. I was certain that they might just opt out of this for Auguste Rodin, knowing how important he is as a stallion prospect in getting beat and what it would do. But fair play, they've gone and they're rolling the big dice here. Potentially is a big and stronger and more powerful unit, and he has just benefited from a couple of months since the Guineas. I'm still not certain. I think that it was just too workmanlike in the Irish Derby for me, and he's had 3 big races now, so let's see how that goes. That King of Steel, it's the potential that there is there for him. But both Tom and Ross were very keen on Emily Upjohn in the Eclipse just a few weeks ago, a horse that clearly seems like a better model this year than she does last year, and they've kept the hood off again. Ross, I know this is something that you were curious about before the Eclipse, and again she's got it off again. They clearly don't think that she needs it. Didn't look like she needed it in the race either in the Eclipse. I don't think she went down on her sword to potentially the best 3-year-old in training. Definitely from a rating perspective, he's better than King of Steel and Auguste Rodin. Why have you left her out of your selections this time?
I just think that the ground isn't going to be anywhere near as much to her suiting. And I watched it back, and I just don't think she was ever going to go past. I sort of slightly drew the conclusion that she was just a bit cute, actually. And so for that reason alone, and the fact she bombed out in this race last time, she was one of the earlier ones off my list in a race where it was very hard to get horses off your list. Okay.
She's my selection, though. We've done this before, where I've thought you were all nutters for not agreeing with me. But I think would be way too cocky for me to be too confident about this. I just think she's a different filly mare now. She's a mare, not a filly. That's an important aspect. I think she proved when she came back after a lot of questions to answer when she bombed out in this race last year, and it was a real horror show, wasn't it? But the Gosden team did a brilliant job to handle her, and they got her to the fillies race on Champions Day, where it was good to soft. There was no doubt about it. It was on the softer side that day. We know because Bailly didn't like it at all. But she got through it. Yes, it was a lesser Group 1 against the fillies, but the Coronation is the race that I'm taking from this. I think she travels so smoothly. I think a strong pace to aim at will be ideal for her. Frankie Dettori knows how to win this race. You no better man than Frankie at Ascot in a King George. It'll be similar. I think he'll want to ride a similar race as he did on Enable, I think, in the Crystal Ocean matchup, where she got quite a wide draw as well, decided to sort of bring her back and tuck her in and play the long game, play the patient game. I think that's what Frankie will do on Emily Upjohn, and it will be her stamina, I think, that will see her out. Stamina which probably the likes of Westover and Pyledriver do have, and we don't know whether the likes of King of Steel and Auguste Rodin, stretching out, they'll need to find every inch of a mile 4 and more for this. So yeah, my God, it's a great titanic race, Tom. It's great for racing, I suppose, to have it, isn't it? The best field King George that I can remember for a long time, and just pleased that we've got pretty much all of them bar Desert Crown.
Well, absolutely. And the fact that we haven't talked about the likes of Luxembourg, who's rated 122, just shows you how good this race is. Hopefully we get the race that everyone's hoping we get, with a big barnstorming finish on Saturday. Hopefully the rain does stay away a little bit, but it's all set up on paper, ready to be one of the best races of the year.
Yeah, I think it's an open betting contest based on, I don't think anyone could be confident on anything, but there's been a case for Hukum, there's a case for King of Steel, and there's a case for Emily Upjohn. But I'm sure whoever you listen to in the run up to this race, you're going to get a differing of opinions, because they all deserve to be there. And fair play, fair credit to every trainer, every connection for giving it a go. They definitely believe that their horse has the chance of taking away the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. What a race we've got to look forward to. So hopefully we've done it enough justice. Before we get on to our naps and next best, TC, you might have a stat attack for us.
Yeah, stat attack, not relating to the King George, but we thought I'd bring back this feature this week, just for a race at Ascot. Yeah, that would be good if I knew what track it was at. And it's to do with trainer Ed Bethel, who's actually got the best win strike rate of any trainer in the flat this season. He's having a phenomenal year so far. He's also got a 32% strike rate with his 3-year-olds in just this campaign. A real phenomenal number for a trainer who doesn't have the biggest stock of horses. £10 on each one of those would have produced a profit of £64.80. Now, he runs the hat-trick seeking Loughton in the 450 at Ascot on Saturday. And it's interesting to see that Holly Doyle has been booked. Holly's only had 2 rides for Ed Bethel, 1 winner. She takes the mount on Loughton, who carries bottom weight. So a good, interesting stat there for Loughton in the 450 at Ascot.
Okay, I think that might relate quite nicely to Ross taking away with his nap and next best.
Yeah, so you might not know, but Ed Bethel's got a very good strike rate. No, the nap is, and I promise all our listeners, I have not conversed with TC until we logged on today.
I know that you're into the dumps, but you need to do your own homework, Ross. This is part of your contract.
If I was reading notes, I'd be reading yours on recent form, wouldn't I? So yeah, the nap is in the 450, and it is Loughton from the Ed Bethel yard. I mean, just wildly impressive in a 7 furlong soft race at Leicester, then 7 furlongs on the all-weather at Newcastle. All the time doing best work very late in the piece. This step up to a mile on a stiff track off bottom weight. Holly Doyle, as TC pointed out, is a really eye-catching booking. Ed Bethel, I mean, I have to, but I'm not a stats person. That's just anecdotally, just love what he does with his horses and always look out for them. So Loughton is an even more confident nap now. I've had the TC stamp of approval. 4 o'clock is Ganesha, who really caught my eye finishing fast in the Windsor Castle at Ascot, having absolutely botched the start and looked outpaced throughout, and then did some really good late work running into about 8th. Was a bit disappointing then next time at Carlisle, but that was on very quick ground. Got back on good to soft ground in the first time, nursery off 82 last time, and absolutely sluiced up. She looked really impressive over 5 furlongs there. She's up £6. That wouldn't have stopped her over 5 furlongs. I'm convinced 6 furlongs is her trip, this filly by showcasing, and I think she'll continue to make hay in nurseries off a mark of 88 in the 4 o'clock.
Yeah, that's a 4 o'clock at York, just to go with your selection back at Ascot. Yeah, that's a good, valuable nursery, isn't it? And just the 7 runners as well. So interesting, like plenty of racing outside of Ascot, York, Newmarket, Ganesha, and thank you for Loughton as well. TC, Ross, whoever it was. Brilliant. And back onto TC, what have you gone for?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I was coming into this podcast ready to nap a William Haggis 3-year-old at York, who I thought had a phenomenal chance. But we're filming this at just after 11 on Thursday. Declarations came out at 10:30, and the horse got taken out. So I've had to leapfrog the next best up and put a different selection in for the next best. So the nap now is Tiffany in the 2 o'clock at Newcastle. Unfortunately, she probably won't be a massive price, but I think she's a very likely winner. She's a typical Sir Mark Prescott improver. Took a couple runs in novice races just to get, known to the game, know what she was doing. She looked really raw, green. She's a big type. And then she actually broke her duck in a novice event. That's worked out exceptionally well. Now, the third from that race in the Geary won on Friday last week, and the fourth home, Isle of Jura, also won on Friday last week, half an hour later. I was actually at Newbury where Isle of Jura was running with a friend, and my friend said, God, Nagiri, who's just won, finished one place ahead of Isle of Jura. Isle of Jura then drifts in the market at Newbury, and we're thinking, maybe that format is completely wrong. But the horse absolutely bolted up. You won't see many more impressive victories than Isle of Jura. I think he actually runs on Saturday, so look out for him. He will be a short price. But Tiffany beat them both. So the form looks pretty strong. She then ran in a void race, put a line through that. The race was stopped with 2 furlongs to run. Don't really know where she would have finished. And then last time out, she dug really deep to win at Windsor. Now, rider Morgan Cole takes over and takes off a valuable £5. She's impressed me recently, so that's a good sign. And also, that means the filly can now run off £1 lower than when she was successful at Windsor. So she looks very well treated in the 2 o'clock at Newcastle. And the next best is Lion Kingdom in the 250 at Newmarket. James Fanshaw's horses are finding a bit of form. His last 3 runners at the time of recording, 2 of them have won, and another one was second. So I'm hoping that he'll saddle another winner here. This is the son of Roaring Lion. He had a rough trip at this track on his penultimate start when he was coming off a 214-day layoff. Nevertheless, he finished a good 4th, and it was a promising reappearance. Last time out, he didn't really produce a performance I was pleased about, but I'm hoping he can take a big step forward. The handicap has dropped in £2. Harry Davis, who claims a further £3, takes the mount. Everything kind of looks in place for Lion Kingdom in the 250 at Newmarket. So he's my next best.
Okay, brilliant. Tiffany and Lion Kingdom for TC. Good luck with them. Yeah, Morgan Cole definitely. I saw her earlier this week riding for Sir Mark Prescott as well. She's doing brilliantly. So good jockey to follow at the moment. My selections, and actually a question to both of you: where did you want to be drawn at Royal Ascot in the big handicaps?
Towards the stand side, if possible.
Towards the stand side. Okay.
I would say so.
Did it not change throughout?
It changed every single day, Jess. It was far side, it was middle, it was stand side. I would generally say stand side, though.
Okay, right. Well, that's going to just change things. Hopefully, it'll just get me a bigger price. Poor old Biggles has been drawn down the far side again. You might remember that he was drawn far side when he was 9th. To Witch Hunter in the Buckingham Palace Stakes. I think he was drawn, I can remind, 3. He's drawn 6 this time. Not as good, not as bad, but not great. But potentially Ryan Moore will know based on that who we can track and who we can follow to try and get down to the at least the middle or the far side or the near side, because I think this horse comes well in. He's got a £3 penalty for his success at Newmarket a couple of weeks ago where he won readily in the end. I was right in the winners enclosure to see him. Such a smashing horse. I think Rafe Beckett has done brilliantly with him. He's clearly had few issues and they've managed him really well. I think a bit of soft ground is really crucial for him as well, which he definitely didn't get at Ascot the last time, but he was second in the Victoria Cup on soft ground as well. And I just think that he's just coming in here with a little bit extra. Just the draw just is a slight concern, but I think that they're trying to make hay while the sun is essentially shining while he's in good form. So Biggles for me in the 3 o'clock at Ascot, and then in the race.
To be fair, sorry to interrupt there, Jess. To be fair, for the draw, I know you said he's drawn low, and that could be a negative based on what I just said. But I've just seen the current going stick readings, and far side is currently the quickest part of the track, 6.5, compared to stand side 6.3, centre 6.2. So he could actually be drawn in the ideal position.
There we go. Well, that's why we're here. That's why we're all helping each other, just like TC did for Ross earlier. Right, on the last selection, the next best is the in the 225, the Fillies and Mares Group 3 over a mile. Now, sometimes I get a little few perks in my job, and that I can chat up some jockeys and ask them about anything that's running over the weekend. And David Egan, I was able to stop and ask about Amena, who they've been waiting with patiently to get back on track. She hasn't been seen since finishing 6th in the Guineas of last year behind Cachet, where she was massively eye-catching. And I remember Roger Varin being really pleased with the way that she ran, the way that Aidan ran at the time as well in the 2000 Guineas. But it was Amena, the filly, that really impressed him. Now, she's had several setbacks, which has meant that she hasn't been back until this season. She didn't run again as 3. She's now a 4-year-old. They did have her entered in the Falmouth Stakes, but she was taken out on account of the ground. So they wanted to go Group 1 with her, but they have had to rework their plans, and now she's in a Group 3. They consider her extremely talented and higher, better class than this. I think that clearly Random Harvest for the Ed Walker team comes into it with great form. She loves Ascot. She's been unlucky to finish 2nd there at Royal Ascot a couple of times, but I think she could be outclassed again by a filly that might just go a little bit under the radar, considering that she hasn't been seen for such a long time. Apparently she is fit. She's ready to go. She's been ready to go for the last couple of weeks. It's just been ground dependent. A daughter of Exceed and Excel should absolutely love it. So Amena in the 225 at Ascot. So plenty for us to watch and enjoy. I know Ross likes to enjoy his cake while he eats good, while he watches good racing. I will be there fangirling over everything. TC, will you make the trip to Ascot?
I don't think so this week. I'm on Sky on Saturday, so it's going to be a bit of a quiet afternoon, I think.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to watching on Sky. Obviously, make sure that you subscribe to whatever podcast channel you listen to. We're not just one week wonders. We come to you when every single Thursday to give you all the best previews for the big action. So make sure that you return if you have just joined in just to hear about this race of the season. We've got lots of content on the YouTube channel, so make sure that you have a look at that as well. But remember that all new SBK users get £30 in free bets when they sign up and bet £10 for the first time. So I hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you very soon.